Yes, he would have denied it, but it had been great sport sitting in his armchair, thinking whom he should pick out from England's teeming millions to make happy with his money. All sorts of schemes had passed through his mind. He had a sense of power which the mere possession of the money had never given him. He began to understand why millionaires make freak wills. At one time he had toyed with the idea of selecting someone at random from the London Directory and bestowing on him all he had to bequeath. He had only abandoned the scheme when it occurred to him that he himself would not be in a position to witness the recipient's stunned delight. And what was the good of starting a thing like that if you were not to be in it at the finish? Sentiment succeeded whimsicality. His old friends of the office, those were the men to benefit. What good fellows they had been! Some were dead, but he still kept intermittently in touch with half a dozen of them. And, an important point, he knew their present addresses. This point was important, because Mr. Meigs had decided not to leave a will, but to send the money direct to the beneficiaries. He knew what wills were. Even in quite straightforward circumstances, they often made trouble. There had been some slight complication about his own legacy 20 years ago. Somebody had contested the will, and before the thing was satisfactorily settled, the lawyers had got away with about 20% of the whole. No wills. If he made one, and then killed himself, it might be upset on a plea of insanity. He knew of no relative who might consider himself entitled to the money, but there was the chance that some remote cousin existed, and then the comrades of his youth might fail to collect after all. He declined to run the risk. Quietly and by degrees he had sold out the stocks and shares in which his fortune was invested, and deposited the money in his London bank. 6 piles of large notes, dividing the total into 6 equal parts. 6 letters couched in a strain of reminiscent pathos and manly resignation. 6 envelopes legibly addressed, 6 postage stamps, and that part of his preparations was complete. He licked the stamps and placed them on the envelopes, took the notes and inserted them in the letters, folded the letters and thrust them into the envelopes, sealed the envelopes, and, unlocking the drawer of his desk, produced a small, black, ugly-looking bottle. He opened the bottle and poured the contents into a medicine glass. It had not been without considerable thought that Mr. Meigs had decided upon the method of his suicide. The knife, the pistol, the rope, they all presented their charms to him. He had further examined the merits of drowning and of leaping to destruction from a height. There were flaws in each. Either they were painful, or else they were messy. Mr. Meigs had a tidy soul, and he revolted from the thought of spoiling his figure, as he would most certainly do if he drowned himself, or the carpet, as he would if he used the pistol, or the pavement, and possibly some innocent pedestrian, as must infallibly occur should he leap off the monument. The knife was out of the question. Instinct told him that it would hurt like the very dickens. No, poison was the thing. Easy to take, quick to work, and on the whole rather agreeable than otherwise. Mr. Meigs hid the glass behind the ink-pot and rang the bell. "Has Miss Pillinger arrived?" he inquired of the servant. "She has just come, sir." "Tell her that I am waiting for her here." Jane Pillinger was an institution. Her official position was that of private secretary and typist to Mr. Meigs. That is to say, on the rare occasions when Mr. Meigs's conscience overcame his indolence to the extent of forcing him to resume work on his British butterflies, it was to Miss Pillinger that he addressed the few rambling and incoherent remarks which constituted his idea of a regular, hard, slogging spell of literary composition. When he sank back in his chair, speechless and exhausted, like a marathon runner who has started his sprint a mile or two too soon, it was Miss Pillinger's task to unscramble her shorthand notes, type them neatly, and place them in their special drawer in the desk. Miss Pillinger was a wary spinster of austere views, uncertain age, and a deep-rooted suspicion of men. A suspicion which, to do an abused sex justice, they had done nothing to foster. Men had always been almost coldly correct in their dealings with Miss Pillinger. In her 20 years of experience as a typist and secretary, she had never had to refuse with scorn and indignation so much as a box of chocolates from any of her employers. Nevertheless, she continued to be icily on her guard. The clenched fist of her dignity was always drawn back, ready to swing on the first male who dared to step beyond the bounds of professional civility. Such was Miss Pillinger. She was the last of a long line of unprotected English girlhood which had been compelled by straitened circumstances to listen for hire to the appallingly dreary nonsense which Mr. Meigs had to impart on the subject of British butterflies. Girls had come and girls had gone, blondes, ex-blondes, brunettes, ex-brunettes, near blondes, near brunettes. They had come buoyant, full of hope and life, tempted by the lavish salary which Mr. Meigs had found himself after a while compelled to pay, and they dropped off, one after another, like exhausted bivalves, unable to endure the crushing boredom of life in the village which had given Mr. Meigs to the world. For Mr. Meigs' home-town was no city of pleasure. Remove the vicar's magic lantern and the try-your-weight machine opposite the post-office, and you practically eliminated the temptations to tread the primrose path.